Right, so I want to make a video updating everyone. Getting right into it, Canada's up to 102,863 cases, 8,508 dead. Alberta had 69 new cases yesterday, which is very high. They tested about 7,000 people, so they didn't test an insanely high amount of people. The active cases went up by about 10, so it's something we should be a little bit worried about, most definitely. Hospitalizations went up by about a few, I think. But we again still no new deaths, so it's not something we should be super worried about. I wouldn't be super worried until we have over like 100 cases a day. And the one thing I want to make perfectly clear too is that in at no point should we lock things down. I mean, the only way to even consider it is if the hospitals literally are overwhelmed. And considering the fact that the hospitals weren't even close to being overwhelmed at 200, 300 cases a day we even had for a few days. I mean, it's not going to happen again. I don't see any way we go over 300 cases a day like we did a few times in April. So I don't see that happening. Not to mention too, at the time we weren't even testing as many people, so we literally would need probably 4 or 5 times as many cases as we're having right now before we need to worry. Now, does that mean we should completely forget about everything and not at least put some thought into it? Absolutely. I would recommend people wear masks, but people absolutely should not be forced to, for the simple reason too that they're not a magic thing that prevents it. And this is the big thing about masks too that I'm sure everyone's aware of, but I wanted to repeat it nonetheless. If masks are this magical thing that prevent everything, then why in the world did we shut down in the first place? Now, if masks don't make that much of a difference, then there should be no reason to force people to wear them. It has to be one or the other. Either masks, either making everybody wear a mask would completely get rid of the virus, or it wouldn't. And if it wouldn't, then there's no reason to force people to wear a mask. Um, there and in reality, the reality is that masks aren't magic. I mean, this is the one thing that Tam was right about. I mean, and you can't really mock me for saying that too, because I mean they basically admitted they're wrong about pretty much everything. So I mean, even they admitted they're wrong, so it's not biased by me saying that. It's just reality. And that masks don't work if you're constantly touching your face. The problem is that it is the summer right now, and especially in places like gyms, I see people saying, "Oh, gyms shouldn't be able to reopen unless people are forced to wear masks." Well, again, people are sweating in there. I mean, not only that, like just out in public too. Like if it's the summer, people are going to be sweating because it's hot out, at least a lot of the time. And the hotter you are, well, the more you're going to want to touch your face because your face is sweating and you want to get the sweat off. It's going to be uncomfortable. So, and then the other problem too is that masks will make it harder to breathe. Now, when you're sweating, you're already going to be breathing a little bit harder than normal because your heart rate will go up. So that's one of the many problems with masks. The other problems too is that it's going to downregulate your immune system too because you're not being exposed to the normal amount of bacteria and whatnot. So the only way you should be wearing a mask is if you're sick. Now, if you're sick, I do think you most definitely should wear a mask. But if you're not, absolutely not. Especially if you're young. If you're young, I would almost insist that you don't because you're just hurting your own immune system, and if you do get it, you're just increasing your chances of ending up in the hospital. So it's not a good idea. If you're healthy, if you test positive, absolutely you should wear a mask. Even if you have a cold or the flu or something, you probably should as well. But like I mentioned yesterday too, the other big news too is that there will be a push to relock things down. I constantly see people talking about. I mean, in the states, they've already paused, locked, or sorry, opening up in a lot of these states. I mean, the first thing to point out too, in places like Florida, they still don't have a lot of cases. Yeah, they're having a record amount of cases, but they still don't have that many cases. They still don't have that many. Not only that, the amount of deaths, even per capita, is way lower than places like New York. So all these people that are up in arms about, oh, we're having record numbers in the states, like it's not something they need to be worried about. It's blatantly obvious to anybody paying even close to attention that the vast majority of the disproportionate amount of cases, let's just say they're having 10,000 cases, more than average, the vast majority of those are young people who have nothing to worry about. In fact, I would say almost all of them, because if you look at the daily new deaths, which I would pull up, but they haven't posted because I'm recording this a little bit early. The daily new deaths haven't gone up. The daily new deaths are still well below 1,000. They had multiple days above 2,000 in April and early May. So there's not a whole lot to worry about. There's not a whole lot to worry about. And the reason that I make this point too is that the government has completely manipulated us this entire time. For the first 2.5 months or so of this, it was you're the worst person ever if you want to go out in public, if you want to open your small business, if you want to protest. And then within a week, it was all of a sudden you're a terrible person if you don't want people to be protesting again. So there's literally nobody that actually believes that the lockdowns were a good thing, because if they did, they wouldn't support the protests. Like, they wouldn't. And they were actively against all the protests of people wanting to reopen. They were against the pro-gun rally in Edmonton. So they didn't, and then all of a sudden they changed their mind too. So what they're literally saying is, yeah, if it benefits the left, we're all for reopening. We're all for people congregating in buildings or even in public. But if it doesn't benefit the left, even if it's on a much smaller scale, we don't believe in it. So again, nobody actually believes in the lockdown. Therefore, I don't care how high the cases get, I'm not going to support the lockdown no matter what, because we were completely lied to the first time around. And again, it's fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's the exact perfect comparison here. The first time around, yeah, shame on me. I should have recognized, I mean, along with other people, should have picked up on it sooner that the government was lying. Um, Now, again, we know the government was lying the whole time, because there's no way they didn't have the numbers. And not only that, even after they had the numbers, they're still lying. They're still lying up until this day. So I don't care how bad the numbers get, I'm not going to support a full lockdown, no matter what happens. I don't care if this is literally black plague. I'm not going to support it, because I'm not going to be lied to again. It's just complete garbage. So anyway, the news out of yesterday, at least not the big news, because most people probably didn't hear about it, but um, Minneapolis City Council hiring armed security. Now, I believe it was a couple, maybe 2, 3 days ago, they voted unanimously to disband or defund the police. And the next day, they hire armed security again. So they don't actually believe what they believe. Again, they don't actually believe what they believe. And not even the defund the police people, not even the defund the police people, because you look inside Chaz, they support defund the police, but yet they have their own de facto police force. It's just, we don't like it when it's the other guy. We love the police when it's us. We love the police when it's our team. Um, so again, the idea that no one actually supports defunding the police. The reality is that they just believe the fake mainstream media garbage that the police are a bunch of racists, which isn't true. Now again, I don't believe in the concept of policing how it's currently being done, regardless. The problem is that you can't just get rid of it the way they want to get rid of it. It would have to be done over a period of time, well planned out, and you would have to go towards a privatized system, or at least more of a privatized system. You can't just get rid of it up overnight and not have no plan for it, because they have no plan. I mean, I shouldn't say that. They have a plan, but their plan is, we're just going to run things like warlords. We're going to run things like, you know, how they run it in Chaz, basically. Like, they have people that go around and basically are de facto police force. I mean, that's what would happen, is that the local warlords, the local militant militia would run things. Now, in the cities, it would be chaos. Um, in the more rural areas, in the more conservative areas, it would be nothing would happen, because people are a lot more likely to be armed. People trust each other more. Crime is a lot less prevalent. So it's the people that are going to be in the cities that are going to be hurt the most. Not only that, another reason why I'm so passionate about this is that uh, the whole defunding the police thing, it's going to hurt the blacks the most. It's going to hurt the black community the most, because they're the ones that need it the most. And that's the problem too, that I point out, is that the reason why I disagree with them so much, them being the BLM, defund the cops kind of people, is that their solutions to the problems they perceive is only going to make their problems worse. And what are they going to do when the problems get worse? They're going to blame Whitey again, and the cycle will repeat. And the cycle will repeat until atrocities are committed, until genocide is committed. I mark my words, I guarantee it, unless people push back, genocide, largely against whites, will be committed in the States and probably Canada as well, but definitely in the States. Um, there is a decent amount of pushback, but definitely not enough. So we'll see how that goes. But I mean, again, it's a thing that no one actually believes in, this whole defund the police thing. If they actually did, they wouldn't hire armed security. If all these Black Lives Matter people actually believe in it, they wouldn't have massive amounts of people that go around with guns that agree with them ideologically. So again, it's just insane. This is from Cambry on Twitter, and she says the left controls every major institution in America: mainstream media, academia, administrative government, Hollywood, big tech, etc. So if institutional racism really does exist, whose fault would that be? Again, I mean, the reality is institutional racism doesn't exist. The only racist laws on the books nowadays benefit blacks. At least from what I've heard, I've yet to see someone give me an actual example of something that benefits. Again, they constantly claim that, oh, systematic racism exists, but yet their their default and their go-to is always ends up back with, oh, slavery and Jim Crow and stuff that happened generations ago. So again, if systematic racism is real, you shouldn't have to bring up those points because you should be able to give modern examples. You have the RCMP commissioner in Canada, like when asked about systematic racism, she's sure it exists, but can't even give an example. Like again, which one is it? Like if it exists, you should easily be able to give examples. And I think one of the examples they ended up giving was something that happened like 15 years ago. Like, again, if this is so prevalent, you should be able to give plenty of examples. It's the same thing with hate crimes. Like, if all this racism is so bad, then why is there so many fake hate crimes? Again, because the left thinks that racism is this massive issue. I guess I'm kind of going too fast here. Um, the way the left gets elected is generally, I mean, they need massive amounts of support from the minorities. And the way they do that is number one, giving them free stuff, and number two, stoking fears of racism. And the problem is that um, to stoke fears of racism, you need to make sure that the supply is very high. The problem is that the demand isn't, sorry, the demand is a lot higher than the supply. Sorry, I had it backwards. The problem is that the demand is incredibly high, but the supply isn't. And so the problem is that they have to fill the gap, which is why you get the Jussie Smolletts, the Bubba Wallace, and all these fake hate crimes. You know, there's so many off the top of my head. There was the Jewish one in, I think it was like Winnipeg or something. They put a bunch of swastikas on their own business. Like again, there's all these fake hate crimes, and not only that too. There's nooses being discovered in Toronto. Again, I mean, I'm not saying I know 100% for sure, but if someone's put a gun to my head and said, I want you to bet whether those were planted there as a false flag or they were actually put there by an actual racist, I would for sure bet on the false flag. But again, that's just my guess. But anyway, again, this is the thing too, like Canada, like we have Justin Trudeau running the country for what, 5 going on 6 years now, and yet he's still up there saying, "Oh, racism is this major issue," and like you've had 5 years to fix it. Like if it's such a big issue, why are you still waiting? Like, and it's the same thing in the States too. Like you had a black president for 8 years. He got reelected. And I think he got reelected by more than what he won by the first time around. So again, if there's so much racism, then why would a country reelect a black guy by more than the first time around? I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm pretty sure. At the very least, he won fairly easily from what I can remember. So again, the idea of systematic racism makes no sense whatsoever. I will throw out the caveat that racism does exist to some degree. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. All I'm saying is that it's not nearly as big of an issue as the left and BLM would have you think. Not even close. At least compared to the destruction of the welfare state and all the ramifications from that. And not only that, the ramifications from electing these idiotic leftist Democrats and liberals. I mean, you look at some of these areas, these cities have been run by Democrats for generations now, 2, 3 generations. and yet there's some of the worst, highest amounts of poverty in North America, highest amounts of crime in literally the world, some of these, and yet they've been run by Democrats for generations. So again, I don't have sympathy for people who constantly complain about stuff but keep doing the same thing over and over again. If you're actually tired about that stuff, stop voting for Democrats. Like I'm not saying you have to vote Republican, but just don't vote. If you're either don't vote or vote Republican or vote third party. But for the love of God, stop voting Democrat. And until that happens, I'm not going to have sympathy for people because you're literally doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we all know, what that entails. Again, this is something I mentioned yesterday, I believe, and it's from Robert J. O'Neill, and he says Derek Chauvin was a Democrat, his union is a Democrat, his chief is a Democrat, his mayor is a Democrat, his representative in the House is a Democrat, both senators are Democrats, and the governor's a Democrat. So again, right from the ground up, the area and the state is run by Democrats. Again, if I mean, for starters, if he was a racist, then how does that make any sense whatsoever? Again, the problem is, I mean, the left is wrong. I mean, it's always the left in the past was the racist. I mean, the Democrats were always the racist. They were the ones that supported slavery. They were the ones that were against the Civil Rights Act. Um, there wasn't a black Democratic senator until like the 80s or the 90s, I believe. The big switch is a lie. I mean, that's the big thing people throw out. It's a total lie. It's not true. There was only a very small amount of people who actually quote unquote switched. Um, I mean, yeah, you look at that too. Like, if this cop was a big racist, then why in the world was he not on the right? At least from the leftist perspective. The reality is that the right isn't the party of the racist. People on the right aren't more likely to be racist. It's actually the left. But from the leftist perspective, it isn't. So let's just go from their perspective and assume that the Republicans are all the racists and the people not on the left are the racists. And why in the world was he a Democrat? And this is the thing too, that there's no real evidence that this was a racist incident. Like, how do we have any evidence whatsoever that this was a racist incident? Um, I really don't understand it. I really don't understand it. Now, the reality is that the mainstream media loves division because it creates it's great for ratings, and they perceive it as benefiting themselves and the left too. So that's why the mainstream media is always all over this. Again, you had CBC promoting that complete and utter lie about that native guy in Alberta, and again, it's just so out of context all the time. And the guy in Atlanta too, like, again, it's just someone was you know the guy in Atlanta, again, the guy, he was drunk, he resisted arrest, he literally punched the cops, and he stole their tasers and tried using it on them. Now, again, if that's not enough to get you shot, then seriously, what is? Like, seriously, what is? And that's the problem too, is that the mainstream media reported as this racist incident. Again, how do you know that it's racist? Again, unless someone is using racial slurs or they have a documented history of being racist, we have to assume that it has nothing to do with racist. And this is the problem with the left too. And another reason why they're the real racists is that they assume that when a white guy attacks or kills a black guy, oh, it must be racism. They just flat out assume that. And again, how do you know that that's the case? Now, if you have definitive proof of that, great. I'm not going to disagree with you. The problem is that they are stoking these racial divisions, and why I care so much about it is that it's getting people killed. Not only that, it's getting a lot of people killed. So that's why I care about it so much. Anyway, this is from Rogan O'Hanley on Twitter, and he says 45 of the 50 governors did not force virus infected patients into nursing homes, but five did. Cuomo, Wolf, Whitmer, Murphy, and Newsom. They're New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, New Jersey, and California. Nearly half of all virus nursing home deaths were in these states. That's not an accident, that's systematic murder. Systemic murder. Again, we knew that the older people were the ones most likely to die from this. We knew that coming out of Italy and out of Spain. So why did these people do that? Like, again, Cuomo's approval rating is this is why, again, I really don't have a hard time trusting these approval ratings and polls and stuff. But again, it's another example of just how stupid the average person is. And that Cuomo's approval rating is like one of the best, like of literally all the governors. It's insanely high, and yet the guy is literally responsible for thousands of people dying. I mean, I don't know what the exact number is, but it's got to be at least 1,000. Like directly responsible. He made a decision that killed that many people, and yet nobody seems to care. Like I really don't get it. I really don't get it. So again, that's something that definitely needs to be talked about. The last thing I wanted to talk about here is from Sarah Fisher on Twitter. And she says the Liberals set up Canada Infrastructure Bank in 2017 to spend $35 billion of taxpayer money on projects that have a policy alignment with the government. Zero projects completed, yet the outgoing CEO received a massive bonus. In what world does that make sense? Again, you hear the left. If you've ever been on Reddit, all the on r/Alberta, r/Edmonton, and r/Canada, all of these people, I mean, it's they're all left-wing echo chambers, and all they talk about is, oh, Kenny and giving money to his corporate buddies, which does exist to some degree. It's just not on the scale that they claim it is. But yet they're completely ignoring this kind of stuff. They're all up in arms about, oh, this this guy running the CEO of, he's getting paid $1 million a year. He had like a $500,000, $250,000 a year severance package. Ooh, he's the worst person in the world. Now again, I don't agree with that kind of stuff. The thing I'm trying to point out is the hypocrisy here too, that something a project the Liberals did, and again, you don't even hear about it. You don't even hear about it. Again, it just goes to show that they only care about it when it's on the right. They only care about it when it's on the right. And the reason why I always talk about this too is that um, the mainstream media is all over it. When Jason Kenney or Doug Ford does something wrong, the mainstream media is all over about it. Everybody's heard about it. It's huge news. Everybody's all over it. Again, that's why I don't talk as much about them, even though I disagree with them on a lot of stuff, not nearly as much as the left, but still. The difference being is that when the left does stuff that's just as bad or worse, nobody talks about it. So again, that's why I'm trying to point this kind of stuff out. So anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last few things, check me out on Twitter. Check me out on Parler. Again, I just got Parler. Also, check me out on BitChute. All the links are in the description, so you can find them all there.